Sometimes she's available and sometimes she's not.
Did you see that article I sent you this morning? It was just to just see the picture.
I don't think so. I've been on calls.
Mhm.
Uh, so no, I haven't. But I don't know if I sent it to you.
I'm sorry?
Um, so I might have sent to you something that Dee or Pierce House sent out of George Wentworth or whatever his name is. He did an article on should you get rid of all of the greenery around your house, with great pictures of houses that have burned, but the greenery around them is fine.
Um,
So if I didn't send that to you, I can.
you did, and I've looked at it some.
Okay, the pictures were good.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right. I'm re-looking at it again. They're really great.
Yeah, yeah, yep.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm just getting I'm both getting both more frustrated and more at peace just accepting that people are freaking stupid. And and um
Hello.
Good morning, Annie, Catherine.
Good morning. Here, let me turn this off here. What do I can't turn it off? Oh, shoot.
Oh, there's Robert.
Oh, there, good. Okay.
Hey,
Here I am. Here you are.
here, yes, Carl's here and Robert's coming.
Okay.
hello, Ani.
Hello.
Hello.
Say it again,
It's
Robert. She didn't hear you.
Ani.
um yeah, Robert, hi.
Yes.
Yeah, the sound is a little strange. Um, but it'll probably still work.
Yeah, let me increase the sound on my end. I think that should help.
Yeah, it's so sharp. It's just a very sharp sound.
Yeah, don't know.
Oh,
So I've been on several calls this morning as I was sharing with Carl. But one of the things that kind of is a segue from what Carl and I were just talking about, really, uh, is I'm looking at from a slightly different perspective. So,
I'm sorry, from what you broke up a little bit.
I'm looking at from a slightly different perspective. One of the calls I was on is the U.S. Values Alliance. So I'm a member, and we're doing a series of presentations, and they have a really different perspective on values, which is difficult for me. So I sent them the values webinars that I'm doing. I'm doing two webinars, one next week and one the following week, uh, showcasing my values work. So values as systems and then how that impacts effective organizations. Those are the two. And they're experiential to some extent. And because I see values as systems, they don't all run together in a big mush for me, which they do for almost everybody else. Everybody else has a plethora of values that they cherish. And one of the issues in the value space is whose value is better or what value is better at this point in time. And people will argue passionately for what they consider to be the value of the moment in the situation. Um, and so the value, so we're doing the the Values Alliance is doing a series of presentations. They picked 5 values, I think, for this year that they're exploring. And so I offered to talk about honesty. And I did that at the same time that I'm reading this book called Smokescreen, which is all about the dishonesty of the Forest Service. So I thought it was a perfect example because you could really say, here's the words the Forest Service is saying, these are the actions they're taking. This is what nature would like to see happen. And what do you see? How, so there's some questions that have come up for me about how does honesty relate to truth? How does honesty relate to trust? How does honesty relate to reality? And how does honesty relate to loyalty? Because that's one of the crux that twists our understanding of honesty. So we want to be honest, except, and it's the exceptions that undermine a real commitment to honesty. So you can say one thing and do another because of that dissonance. That dissonance allows for us to do those two things and feel good about it. And loyalty is the key link that will make it okay to be dishonest. So that,
So,
go ahead.
so how does integrity
Ah,
enter
well,
into your thinking?
great. Really.
Honestly, Robert, how could you ask that question?
I'll go sit in the corner if you'd
No,
like.
he's being funny. He's being funny. That's a facetious.
For me, that kind of
What-
takes the place of honesty.
Well, and that's absolutely brilliant. That's why values are so seductive.
I know.
When we choose a value like loyalty, okay, and we're being loyal to a person, we can feel we have integrity in our behavior because we're being true to that, even though we're undermining other parts of ourselves, both reality and trust and other and honesty, because that requires that. So you feel a certain coherence in that commitment, which can make you feel like you have integrity. But it's dicey because when you push at it, then you get these little uncomfortablenesses about, well, what about this and what about that? So people don't want to talk about that. They'll resist conversation.
I mean, a real problem here is there has to be a context that is solid, immovable. And your prime directive does fall in that category. Almost nothing from the human mind, meets that requirement because it's so variable and it's based on context and it's based upon, all kinds of flights of imagination, many times. Whereas if you can, if you can break it down in your own thinking, and this will vary from person to person, but am I really meeting the prime directive? Do no harm, support the natural outworking,
And the vibrance of life, the joy of life.
vibrance of life.
Yeah.
That's sort of there's no arm twisting after that. I mean, you're either doing it or you're not. Then you can say you're being honest to a principle of life with some clarity. I mean, there's a
Robert, let me I think what you're saying is really great. So but I want to sort of reword it to really understand. So whether integrity, honesty, or maybe any value, it requires the context, or as somebody else says, a framework, so that you some principles that you that are primary. This is it. This is the goal, or this is what we're about. And if what you're saying, doing, is not supporting this, then you're allowed of integrity or not being honest. You're not being honest to how forests work, or
Well, and that's the seduction of the value sets, actually, because there are three systems of values, and each of them have an intent. So if you're consistent with the intent of protection, which loyalty is, then you have integrity in being dishonest.
say that again, please.
Uh, what did I just say? If you, because each system has an intent, if you are consistent with the intent of that system, so one of the systems is protection, to be safe. Loyalty is a value in that system. So if you're going to be consistent, have integrity in that system, then you have permission to be dishonest. Because honesty undermines loyalty and the obedience that loyalty demands. And so it doesn't work in that system really well. You can say you want it, and you do at times, but you also don't at times, and you'll kill people. You'll kick them out of the system. You'll punish them. You'll do other things to them if they show up in your face against what the loyalty requirements demand. And we'll see that with Trump. Trump is such a perfect example of that.
So it seems like the a quality or something that what people are, maybe the primary thing they're protecting is their own ego or their own belief system.
We're all doing that. We're all trying to make sense of life and trying to figure out how to be a good person with the other people that we're with. And this is the only framework that I've seen that helps you discern those tensions between what you might feel as a human being and what you're being required by your culture to do. Because we feel those and we respond to them in different ways. We dismiss them, or we bail, we do all sorts of things, but we don't understand it. And I think if we have a way of seeing and talking about it, it helps not only us, but others, because we're not the only person in that. But we are seduced into behavior because of these subtle coercions. We want to have integrity. If we want to be safe, if that's the primary, and if that's the conversation, and we're in a conversation now of fear, right? About how we have to be safe in all these different ways. We have to get rid of immigrants. We have to do all these things to be safe. So being safe means you have integrity by doing these behaviors. These values are obedience, loyalty, those kinds of things. And we know them instant. We know them. I mean, we've been raised with them. They permeate us. So we know what that means. And so when you're honest and you go, wait a minute, do we really want to do this? You get eaten up because you're upsetting this whole apple cart over here. It makes people feel unsafe because this is where safety is. And you're actually putting them at risk by bringing up these things that don't fit in that context. But if you can talk about the context, I mean, are you safer among enemies or among friends, really? Now, there's a conversation, and it's usually friends that make you feel safer. So does beating up other people make them friendly? Or
No.
I mean, there are conversations, I think, that can come out of this within that context that can shift it if you're aware of those puddles of intent that we just naturally fall into. And the conversation around life is not one we've had very much in the Western world at all. So it's a new conversation, and it requires new senses of discernment, I think.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the point of revelation as to whether you're really, hitting the mark. Because my impression of what humanity is, in a very short form, is to say that we are all different, absolutely all different. And we have certain qualities, and these qualities produce within us, if they're nurtured and developed in a way that is productive according to a basic plan, which is a directive, which is to support life. You have to have a central focus. Without that, it's complete hellfire. It's just scattergun approach. But we are all different, and I do respect the natural tendency to respect the difference in everybody. But there has to be some ordering system, and that's by having, some kind of prime directive. Now, some call that God. In listening to you, Catherine, I've become a firm believer in this prime directive to support life. Supporting life is not necessarily supporting the natural world in the way that we see it, because the way we see it is not natural. I mean, it's the way we formed it. Human beings have had so much effect on the natural world that it's not natural anymore. It's not authentic, if you might say. But
Well, I would also just add that even the way we think we see it is.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So supporting life and everyone, rallying around that prime focus, which will be different for everyone. Chances are you're going to get a number of effects, actions that complement one another.
Mhm.
But that all requires, the forbearance to defer to having your mind and senses open to what's the word, to impressions that are coming through, the essences that are coming through, and are they true or not? I mean, it's not something that can be just handled the way sometimes values caucuses are done. I worked with one at the United Nations, and it was, enshrining words with certain sense of meaning. Those were all choices, and we each had different choices all the way around. I've never come across something as clear as, your prime, directive, which is to support life. And you need to have that in the background in order to have this all work. I mean, to have people in large groups, believing that, not just believing it, living it, discerning, what is best for me to support life. Well, chances are you will find that you are working in coordination with many others if you're all doing that. I don't know. It's a very interesting question, because I've been working with this idea of humanity as actually being, a conglomerate, a single conglomerate being. That there is that sense of us, because after all, we share a lot of the same consciousness, subconsciousness, that is developed over untold lifetimes, and we're sharing that, all of us, into varying degrees and various, what I mean? That there is a real commonality within, the human condition.
We don't think like dolphins.
Because dolphins think more.
Dolphins don't think like humans either. They think like
No.
dolphins.
And whales.
But is that in the context of the dolphins think better, are better at thinking of
No,
all the dolphins?
better, just different.
Different, yeah, I agree.
It's just different. If just they have different interests, different understandings of what makes a good life. Just
But I was just also just specifically responding to Robert's point about that we're missing this shared humanity or shared.
Well, we have three, we do have, I think, three main things that we've focused on. The first has been safety. That's been a prime focus for our species for millennia.
True.
And so we've created values that make that happen amongst us. That's why that value set is so strong. It's not wrong. It just has a purpose, and that purpose is not so important anymore. It's shifted. It's different than it used to be. And then the thing about being effective, that's part of our growing. We need to be effective. We want to exert our power. We want to know what we can do. We want to see our self-expression. We want to be able to express ourselves. Nothing wrong with that either, but it has a context. But if you put both of those into the context of life, everything shifts. Everything shifts. If it's all in the context of safety, everything shifts too, but it's in a different way. If it's all in the context of being effective, everything shifts, but it also looks very different. So it's that context makes all the difference. And life is the only thing that holds them all. It refines them, it changes them, it shifts them, but it doesn't dismiss them.
What was the third one?
Well, life,
Safety, effective.
effectiveness, and life.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that would be acceptance of life as a prime directive.
The acceptance of life, of the responsibility for life's thriving.
Okay, there you go.
Actually, what it
Responsibility.
really is. Because it, oops. Ani, did you fall off?
I'm gonna get some water. I'll be right back.
There you are.
Okay.
Okay, are you back?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
I'm I'm back, but I'm not with you all because you're analyzing stuff. And it's like analyzing values, analyzing content, it's like, that's not where I'm at all. I have nor where I want to be.
Well, it might be useful in some ways.
Well, I'm about relationship.
And
It-
that's that's I think that's what we're talking about actually.
Well, it doesn't sound like it. Analysis is very different than relationships.
Well, relationships are different in each of the different perspectives that we've been talking about. So if you want to be safe, you have different kinds of relationships than you do if you want to be effective.
If you want to be safe, if you want to be safe, putting that in quotes, it's like, what are we talking about here? It's, I don't move very far from relationship, from relationship with self, since that's where it all springs from.
But it also has to include others. That's the hook. That's the hook.
But from the vantage point of self and whatever that is. I mean, it just seems so analytical how we're doing here, and I'm not with you. That's not my approach.
At the risk,
Not what I value the most.
at the risk of being ornery, what you're saying sounds like analysis.
Analysis is what I'm taking issue with.
And
our analysis is what I'm taking issue with.
And Carl is suggesting is you're analyzing.
You're analyzing. You're talking about. You're analyzing. Your let's see your thinking or your value of a relationship. Like I guess maybe the question is how do you converse with others without some type of analysis that you share back and forth to to come to maybe to come to a relationship between the group.
How do you create harmony without some sort of evaluative process, which requires an analysis?
Agreed.
Maybe I should just exit because I'm really not interested in this conversation because it's about relation. I tend to focus by choice on relationship, beginning with my relationship with myself.
Yep.
My relationship with myself, and then extending that or integrating with my relationship with others from the vantage point of relationship with self.
And I absolutely agree. And I think what I would say we were talking about is that each of these three perspectives gives a context for that process, which is different. And Robert's thought about integrity is really germane to that. And I think also one of the things that Robert was alluding to, which we haven't called out really, is the sense of self-reflectiveness, which ties in our understanding of ourself and our authentic integrity, can I say that? About who we think we are and want to be, with how we're being required to act in response in the groups we're in. So we're not very skilled at that. We're not given permission to do that. We have to kind of pull that back if we want. We have to do it ourselves. And it's interesting to think about creating spaces where self-reflection is inherent in the relationship space of the group, so that you can actually call out, think about this, and when there are disagreements, you can say, well, let's all stop and reflect about what is the context we're looking at, what is the foundational thing that we're all aligning with, and how do you personally feel about how you're showing up with this, and that kind of stuff. Being able to create processes to work through the dysfunction that we've really been raised in, and the sophistication we've managed to achieve that allows us to undercut a lot of the things we believe, the rationales that we're so quick to manufacture to say why we can do what we're required to do, even if we don't want to, and to give us more permission to be really clear about what we want to do, and then to have the agency to bring that forth. So I think that really speaks very strongly, Ani, to what you're talking about, that it starts with self, because it truly does. You have to be clear about what your intent is in this, and whether you agree with the intent maybe that the group is expressing. Maybe there's a difference between what you see could happen and what the group is suggesting should happen. And how do you handle that dissonance?
I have a question for Anna. If because I think we were that your prime directive is to support life and nature.
Create the conditions that support life that we
I'm
have.
sorry?
To create the conditions, we have
create.
responsibility to always create the conditions that support life. That's such a different context. We're not responsible for others. You can't make others do stuff, but you can create the conditions that allow them to flourish. That you can help.
So, but at the the thing that's supporting life is say nature. Just so some idea of nature.
It's not. I don't think you can say that, Carl. I think that
so
is how nature does it. So it's not outside of it. It's intrinsic to how nature, how other living things behave. I really want to say that, because nature objectifies it again. It makes it something else.
Yeah.
I mean, what I was trying to get to is a question to Ani about her, how would she articulate her relationship with nature? Is that maybe with what you're just saying it's not a viable question to be?
Ani?
really not in the same space that you guys are. It's hard for me to really embrace and relate to this context, whatever it is. Because to me, we can't go very far beyond self-reflection. And if we did a good job of that, a lot of the questions we bring up would be answered. But we're into analysis, and I'm not.
Well, I think I think you're right in that everything starts with understanding self and being in coherence with that understanding, having your actions in coherence with that understanding. I think where it gets dicey and where analysis is helpful is when other people join that context and they're different.
Mhm.
And it's like, how do you work with that? How do you understand that? How do you include that difference instead of spitting them out because they're different, which is, we're really good at spitting things out. We're really good at getting rid of things that are different, uncomfortable, inconvenient, whatever. That's the sort of one of our major Western society approaches to what we call life, but it's really death because it's getting rid of things instead of including things. And so that's where I feel there's a synergy and a usefulness in being able to go from self to other and self to group, and developing skills on discernment and agency that help us create the conditions that support life and the world we want to live in, really. I think that's part of the process.
We can nail this down just to this one precise example. How do we, the four of us, have a conversation right now, given that we have stated some differences in how we perceive this operation of talking together and accomplishing something. And that's well worth our time to engage in. But it doesn't, I think what I'm hearing you say, Ani, is that you want to deflect away this sense of, well, I know what I'm thinking, what I'm saying, and I can start to analyze what's wrong with what Ani's saying, and maybe we'll get somewhere. And I think what Catherine's alluding to here is that there's a very precise discernment required so that we can actually work together in finding out what is the middle ground between, certain perceptions.
How things are included.
Because we're all going to be different.
Is that finding the middle ground? Is that the middle ground between Ani's self and myself and yourself and Catherine's self?
I guess you could, portray it that way.
The way I look at it is to recognize the other's truth.
Yeah, there you go.
Because I really find that everybody has a truth. And when you can find what that is, it's like there's a connection there because there's an agreement there. There's a recognition of that is shared. So it's a place to stand together and then to begin to see how to work with the rest that's not there yet. And for me, it gives also an incredible appreciation for others because you can see the brilliance that they have in having that understanding and the value of that understanding. So they have intrinsic value. They're not throwaway, even though they're difficult. And even though there might be inconsistencies in their thoughts and all those other things that get in the way, I always hang on to that brilliance and that truth that I see them holding. Yeah, and trying to bring that out because that's our gift, actually. It's just who we are because we see things from such different perspectives. We have an insight into truth that nobody else can possibly have because they don't stand in our shoes. It's just not possible. That's the brilliance of this design of diversity and what holds it all together. That's why it doesn't fragment, even though everything's different. The world is there's nothing in the world that's the same as anything else. No snowflakes, no blade of grass, no nothing is the same. And yet it hangs together. So what's the thread? How does that happen? I just think that's a magical thing to explore. And that's just true of us people. Because Robert's exactly right. There's no two of us the same at all. And that's exciting and fun.
What's the purpose of, oh, excuse me. Go ahead, Ani.
No, I'm just agreeing with what Catherine just summarized. But to me, it's so much simpler, and pretty much it's all self-oriented, and by that I mean, I'm not even sure what I mean. I just what is presenting itself to me in this dialogue is the newest part of our brain is the frontal lobes. The frontal lobes is about self-reflection, and so so much of the relational dynamics that we experience is an aftermath of self-reflection, because it's the way we're created. I mean, these frontal lobes that were added, it's like self-reflection, and that seems to be ground zero to me.
Other as reflection of self also.
Well, that gets a little twisted. I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying that it's other than self. I mean, I'm just I'm not sure what we're even trying to talk about. Well, what are we doing? What are we saying? What are we after?
I think we're trying to figure out a way to feel like you feel included in the conversation because you don't feel included. And to figure out a way for there to be a feeling of openness amongst the four of us.
Oh, I feel that openness, and I do feel included. I just have a different perspective. My perspective is more oriented to self-reflection first, to be aware of that dynamic.
Well, nobody's arguing about that. I think that's a shared understanding. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. So
I mean, to me, all energy, I would hope that I would direct my energy toward that. I don't know. I don't know how to finish that. I just know that what goes on inside of me is vital for me to be aware of. I don't know even hardly what we're talking about, what the context is that we're after here.
Well,
and when I get it, when I am at that place, I resort to self-reflection, because I don't know a better place to go to.
I think maybe, because I agree with you about self-reflection, but I think there's two parts of self-reflection. So when you're so speaking for myself, when I'm reflecting about how I feel, I'm also trying to get a clearer, deeper, more authentic understanding about how the other person is in that same place. Not trying to make them the same as I am, but to recognize how they might be authentic in their own space. And sometimes I can see a dissonance that they're acting in one place and actually might be in another place, but they're not willing to claim that. But just being aware of, I mean, for me, that's the reflective space, is trying to find what's real and authentic, both for me in what's trying to happen here. I mean, this is where nature really works when you're talking about the land. What does the land want versus what I want? Those are two really different things, but getting a sense of how life wants to express itself in this place is what we're talking about so much with nature, and then blending with that. So I want a house and the land is saying, yeah, but not here. Am I able to hear that? And how do I respond to that? Do I go, well, too bad? Or I really, really, really want it here. I don't care. Or do you go, all right, you don't want it here. Where would it work? And can I accept that? I mean, that's for me the process of relationship. That's how we find rich relationships, is this integration and respect for all of the different voices in a and sometimes that takes time to hear the voices, to give them space to come up, especially when people aren't used to being authentic or even talking. It takes a while to be able to bring that forward. And if you don't spend that time, then it comes out later in terms of resentment or resistance or judgment, or I'm not going to play the game because I'm not really part of it, and all those other things that come out because they didn't have a say at the beginning. It wasn't the space wasn't there for that to happen. So I don't see this so much as analysis as trying to sharpen our awareness about the things that need to happen to keep ourselves authentically in harmony with other beings, including humans.
Yeah, I would introduce the word curiosity into this discussion because
Yep.
there's so many different aspects that I cannot discover or witness within myself
Yes.
that may be highly developed in someone else. So, there's the limits of self-reflection, but I'm curious to see what another Ani, what you are bringing to the table here when you're saying I'm not following something, so I'm really curious as to what, to what you have. It's not necessarily to work things out, although eventually it does seem to happen, if we talk to each other. But it's a curiosity, like, oh, okay, that's different. Let's look into that. And that's what I'm talking about in terms of people working to relating to one another, becoming friends, for instance. That for me, friendship is where I'm constantly being surprised, not by lack of integrity, but I mean being surprised by all the time by discovering just something a little bit different than I ever knew about them.
Yeah, and I would add to that is that through a process of friendship or conversation, that we sharpen our own perception, our own ourselves, our awareness. I mean, how we define ourselves by finding commonality, from insights, from sharing insights from other people. They both provide perhaps a different shade of the same idea that you can adopt or adopt some of it or not. And so that through that conversation, it sharpens your own identity.
I would agree, very much so.
Well, and for instance, I really do enjoy, Ani, when you question something to the point of, wait a minute, this isn't coming through at all. And look what we've been doing. We all felt we had to do it because we're curious as to what's the impediment. Yeah. And actually, am I understanding Catherine and Carl as well as I thought I was? I mean, you see where that goes. There's intentionality in terms of giving yourself over to dialogue, but that means that you really have to listen and consider everyone's point of view. So I appreciate when you do that, Ani, bring something up that's really sort of a hard line to cross, that that's not the way I meant it, but that it's hard for you to cross it without us shifting our conversation. I mean, I think that's very valuable.
I appreciate that.
I would agree.
And I appreciate what we've learned by doing this.
I just know it's all about relationship. I mean, well, first and foremost, it's all about self-reflection. It's all about it's all about our relationship with ourself.
Well, and ourself and other. I don't think you can leave the other out. I think Carl's point is really, really germane, because that's the gift we are to each other. When we're curious and open and listen to what another says, especially I think if it's hard or if it's confusing or jarring in some kind of way, there's usually a new thing that's there that is an addition to our own understanding of our own self, as Carl said, that's being showcased by the other's difference. It's sort of like shining a little light on something in ourselves that we don't quite understand. And when we take the time to explore that from the other, then our own self-understanding is expanded and strengthened. And that's for me actually the joy and the excitement that comes from those kinds of situations, when you really stay in them and go, I don't get it, I don't get it, I don't get it. And it's and then but you stay long enough to see what that piece is. It just expand your own understanding of self in a different way. And you need the other to do that. You can't do it by yourself. You absolutely have to be in relationship to make that happen.
Yes.
Well, you can do it by yourself, but it makes it easier, but not very interesting.
I didn't hear that or understand it.
It was sort of a joke.
Oh, okay.
What's the quote that from one of the Greek philosophers? A life unexamined is a life not worth living, or something.
But I agree with that completely. I'll give you a physical example. It's not all mental. I was putting up a grab bar in my shower this morning, and it has 2 points of connection to the tile wall. And I got one of those points in place. There's a little insert that I screwed in and got it just right. And it was very difficult to finally get it set up, because they're so tightly the tolerances are very, very tight. So I put this grab bar in on the one lug that I'd screwed into the wall. And then I've got to figure out where the other lug's going to go. Well, to make a long story short, I finally decided that I'm at my limit. So I'm calling in a friend with other tools. And our conversation is very similar to that.
I love that. I like that.
We bring friends in who have different ideas and they teach us something. Not that he has all the answers, this friend, but I figured together we'll have a better chance because I don't want to screw this up. And my wife doesn't want me to screw this up. So, there are a lot of ways to put, impute real world value to these conversations we have.
Yeah, I absolutely love the insights of others. I always feel like I'm working with one hand tied behind my back when I'm doing things on my own now. I really don't like it. I don't feel that the product is as good as it would be if I was engaging with others. And the more real time back and forth that is, the usually the better it works. The more pushback people are willing to give about, oh, it doesn't quite fit for me for whatever reason, means that when you adjust that so that the other person feels good, it's always a better product. It's always better. It's always sharper. It's always better than what it would have been if I just gone forward on my
Right.
own. So it's a both and so much. It's definitely about me, but it's also about the other. And I just love Carl's insight that other sharpens ourselves as well. It really does expand and deepen our own understanding of self. That's the brilliance of that design, I think.
So I'm in kind of a funny mood, but when Robert was talking about earlier, when he first mentioned that we are all different. When I hear that, I always think, and maybe I hope this has a benefit or a value, but it makes me think of the scene from the movie, the Monty Python movie, Life of Brian, when Brian opens the shutter door and all these people who are following him, because they see him as the Messiah, and he's surprised by it, and his mother's surprised by it, and he yells out, "You are all different," and they all shout, "We're all different," except for one person in the crowd says, "I'm not." It's the person who in this case, the person who says, "I am not different," is the person who's different. And to me, that just speaks to the human condition.
Yeah, that was their genius, the Monty Python group.
Yeah. Oh, the wonderful conundrums, because we're all the same and we're all different at the same time. They're both true.
I mean, I love that Sermon on the Mount. What do you say? What do you say? Said, "Blessed are the cheesemakers." Oh, yeah, blessed are the cheesemakers.
Actually, I may have shared this story with Catherine because maybe seems also appropriate too, because my introduction to Monty Python, I was definitely the one that was different, because not growing up in a place where I got public television or public radio. I started college without a clue what Monty Python was. So it's in third year design where everybody spends a lot of time together. And they start making jokes. People started doing Monty Python quotes like, "It's just a flesh wound," and everybody laughs. All the things they might say, and I had a clue what they were talking about. So I was like, I am completely not part of some conversations. So actually, in this conversation, I realized it's an example of the, I was I was different because I didn't I didn't
Have that experience.
but and I had to, but I also did something human, like human, like, oh my God, am I don't know if I said thought this, but like what's wrong with me, or what have I missed? Am I stupid, or because I didn't know, I wasn't in on the thing that everybody else was in on.
Right. Right.
Um,
Mm.
Well,
Is everybody still there?
Yep.
we're here.
Okay.
I was just going to say that what we've, well, what Carl's story definitely indicates, doesn't imply it, it definitely lays it out thick, is that when you get to these big meetings, which is where we started this conversation, is values groups that are trying to identify values, and thinking that if we all agreed on what honesty is, suddenly the world would be a better place, and we'd
And
be
that's
drinking pina coladas, in the hot sun, every um and some people just haven't been in, that isn't part of their experience.
I don't think it's real. I don't think that is a myth. That idea of harmony is a myth, that everybody will be the same. I
Yeah,
don't,
right. Yeah.
it's not a possibility, actually. So learning to enjoy that dissonance and difference is, for me, a real skill.
I'm sorry, but say that again, because it's if
To enjoy the difference and dissonance is a real skill, instead of trying to eliminate it or make it bad, wrong, or what, all the other things we do. But to understand how it is in context. Yeah, and that's been my life's work, really, is to create a framework where that does fit, where I can handle all that range without feeling like I have to make it one thing or another. And just know where it fits in that, and then that's fine. It doesn't mean I have to be there. It doesn't mean anything else. It's just appropriate in this place, and that's great. And I can be somewhere else. I don't have to be there. And I don't have to make it bad or wrong. I don't have to change it. It's just there. It gives you a certain kind of peace.
Yep. Yep.
Well, let me just say what's going on in me while I have the opportunity to. I feel an analysis overload. I just feel in analysis overload being part of this dialogue. I put in quotes because I'm not even sure that we are in dialogue. I don't know what this is that we're doing. Just giving opinions and perspectives. Where does it lead? How can we cultivate it for our own maturation? Because we are of a very young species and we're not fully mature like horses are, or those, beings who have been on Earth longer than us, evolving longer than us.
Yeah, I think that's what we've been talking about, actually.
It's kind of like improvisation. The point is to simply to play along. And some skits you get into, some routines, you get into dead ends and you laugh and you start over again. And I don't think, well, I agree with you, Ani, in one respect, but I think people who seriously do dialogue and want every word to count and, it's so important, you know, to get, no, I mean, it's improvisation. And every once in a while, there will be this emergent factor that's just amazing and lead in a new direction. But other times it'll crash. I mean, not crash, but you know, it won't be,
Mm-hmm.
it won't be that valuable, but you keep going as long as you are curious and want to keep going.
Perhaps, yeah, there's also the idea of a crash or like a mistake. You know, there's the idea that one can learn more from a mistake than from a success.
Yeah,
If
true.
you have the attitude that the mistake is not the end.
Yeah. Yeah. It's part of the process. Yep.
Well, so I'm gonna want to go. It's after 2:30 for me, and I need to go do something. But I've actually really enjoyed this. Thank you, Annie, in particular, for, you know, giving us an emergent quality, you know, pathway to take. And I think we did it. Also, yeah, I need to get going.
Good luck with your grab bar.
Well, that'll come tomorrow. I'm leaving it off today. So thank you very much.
Thank you
See you
both.
next time.
Okay, Carl, can you stay for a minute?
Sure.
Okay, thanks, Annie.
Okay.
Okay,
All right.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, I'm gonna turn off the recording.